The artist that I'm going to be talking about today is Ricardo Dominguez. And I didn't make this image. It was made by a UCLA student, Zendaya Anthony, for one of Ricardo Dominguez's UCLA guest lectures. But I picked it because I really like how it displays Dominguez's likeness through his contributions to early internet culture, as well as like a picture of him in ASCII code. So, Ricardo Dominguez was born in 1959. He was born and raised in Las Vegas, which is something that he said really affected him growing up near a lot of military bases and military testing sites in Nevada. He is a professor and the current chair of the Visual Arts Department at UCSD. He got his BFA in theater arts from Southern Utah State University, and there he discovered that he was fascinated by political theater as well as agitprop theater. After graduating from Southern Utah State University, he moved to Florida and then later to New York City and then now to San Diego. He is a performance artist, a hacktivist, and a tactile media artist. He is pretty strongly anti-capitalist, which is something that we can see in a lot of his works and like his lectures that he's had as well, of course. And he's very interested in empowering Latino, specifically Zapatista communities, media freedom, the intersection of digital bodies and real bodies. He's the founder of the Electronic Disturbance Theater 1.0, 2.0, the Bang Lab at UCLA. He's a founding member of the Critical Art Ensemble and the co-founder of The Thing or Thing.net, which is the first website devoted to internet art. Most of Ricardo Dominguez's works I found are made in collaboration with the art groups that he was a part of, so the Critical Art Ensemble and the Electronic Disturbance Theater mostly. So I'm going to be talking about one of the early performances of the Electronic Disturbance Theater, and this one is a virtual sit-in 1998. This is an act of electronic civil disobedience, which is just civil disobedience but done online. And the Critical Art Ensemble has said that it's essentially online agitprop theater, which kind of ties into Dominguez's interest from when he was going to school in Utah. So this form of electronic civil disobedience is a virtual sit-in. And a virtual sit-in is a form of electronic civil disobedience where a large number of activists simultaneously and repetitively access a target website to overload it, causing it to slow down or crash. And I have a picture on the top right that kind of shows what that virtual sit-in looked like, because it was essentially a DDoS attack or a direct denial of service attack where the Electronic Disturbance Theater, in collaboration with the Zapatista Liberation Army, targeted the Mexican president Zedillo's website and is reloaded over and over again until it crashed. And this was done manually by volunteers and people part of this group that made this happen. Whereas, like nowadays, this is something that people do completely automated, so it's pretty radical, I would say, and a good way for me to like understand like a DDoS attack too is like when you're on like Instagram or something and you reload the app over and over and over again, and eventually it like kind of shuts down and crashes, doesn't let you go on it. Like that's what was happening to the Mexican president's website. And this virtual sit-in was done to spread awareness for the Zapatistas' call for the self-defense of indigenous social autonomy and agency in the face of its constant negation by the Mexican state. Over and over again, President Zedillo's website was reloaded with error not found messages, but FloodNet, which is the application that was being used to perform this virtual sit-in, which was also made by Ricardo Dominguez, it invited participants to send personal messages to the user error log, which produced lines like human rights not found or justice not found. And tying into what we were learning in class, these tactical poetics of FloodNet followed in the footsteps of the Fluxus movement's instruction pieces, which was pretty interesting. It was I just think this was really cool. It's not the only one that they have done, but it really does show how significant Ricardo Dominguez was in the early days of the internet and internet activism. And it's very cool to see how art and internet activism can go together. And another really interesting work that does that is the Transborder Immigrant Tool. The Transborder Immigrant Tool is a mobile phone app intended to provide GPS navigation for individuals making their way to the United States through the desert of the US-Mexico borderlands, specifically to water caches. There's an inclusion of poetry as well that goes along with the GPS. And that inclusion was an effort to provide information on survival skills and assist in the emotional well-being of those enduring this very dangerous journey. And it also acts as a way of camouflaging the active aiding and abetting that this tool technically applies to, which is something that was said by Dominguez and one of his collaborators on this work. The Transport Immigrant Tool is considered a performance intervention that includes the app itself, public reactions, and an ensuing government investigation, as it was under investigation by congressmen and right-wing media, and eventually the FBI, which resulted in the program just being shut down. And even though it was never put into effect, it succeeded in confounding systems of political control, creating a call to action, and using poetry to dissolve the US-Mexico border. And the Transborder Immigrant Tool really reflects our readings from this week, or from earlier, about how borders can be a form of violence and social expulsion. I really like this quote that the Electronic Disturbance Theater had that ties together how art about the US-Mexico border applies to greater dialogue on international borders. The Transborder Immigrant Tool is a last-mile safety device designed to aid the disoriented of any nationality in a desert environment. Now that we've seen some works by the Electronic Disturbance Theater, I want to talk about another art group that Dominguez was a part of, which is the Critical Art Ensemble. Dominguez is second to from the left. While Dominguez was living in Florida, he worked at a lesbian bookstore, which is where he met the people that would become the first members of the Critical Art Ensemble. And this collective was made up of people with different educational and career backgrounds that came together to provide different perspectives on how to explore the intersections between art, critical theory, technology, and political activism. And I put some cool, mostly installation pieces that they've done over the years on the sides. One that I think is particularly interesting that I wrote about in my essay is Acceptable Losses. And I also think Seized from 2008 is really interesting because that shows one of the members, Steve Kirsch. Ooh, I hope that's his name. But in Seized, those were all of his items that were seized during an FBI raid on his house. So Dominguez was only a member of the Critical Art Ensemble for a number of years before moving on to other things like the Electronic Disturbance Theater 1.0 and 2.0, as well as becoming a professor at UCSD. It's a little bit difficult to determine exactly which works he participated in, but I'm pretty sure he participated in the one I'm about to talk about, and I just think that this one is really interesting. So Flesh Machine is a performance and a lecture that simulates the biological hierarchy in the flesh economy, which is the buying and selling of the human body and its biological components for profit. This is a participatory art project that explores the commodification of the human body within the context of biotechnology and eugenics, specifically through the fertility market. And so in Flesh Machine, they use the intimacy of a literal IVF procedure. Like, all of the participants will go through, like, what it would be like if you were going to do that. And they attempt to underscore class politics, economics, and the overall logic of the human commodification implicated in eugenics. This this performance uses a simulated classroom lecture with performance skits to directly immerse the audience in the experience of flesh as a commodity. After that informal lecture portion is over, the audience goes onto computers and they assess their individual suitability, which would be further reproduced through donor DNA, cytoplasm, and surrogacy. And so they take this test, and those that pass the test are allowed to have a cell sample taken by technicians and have their sample amplified or preserved in a cryo tank. And I think it's really cool that they had, as you can see, like on the bottom, these bottom three pictures and one on the top, right? Like they had technicians and they had like people within that field that actually knew like more fully what they were doing. They had all that there. They had a cryo tank. It was pretty cool. And then in addition to those pictures, there's also the middle one, which is the lecture portion. And there's also the participants at the computers. And then the top three, I think these are from Flesh Machine performed in Vienna. These are some of the like satirical images that they included in the lecture. And it's really interesting because the baby one is kind of obvious. They have this like IVF discourse happening at Flesh Machine, but there's also this connotation that you can use eugenics not just to alter the DNA of a baby, but you can alter DNA in a way that can benefit capitalism in creating superior labor one worker at a time, creating the like ideal specimen to participate in a capitalist society. Um, yeah. And so Flesh Machine, after people can, have their sample taken, they do these lectures and stuff. The event culminates with a section where a cryopreserved embryo's life depends on money raised during the performance. If enough money is not raised, the embryo is evicted from its cryo tank and it dies. Dies. To date, every performance has ended with the death of the embryo, and this mechanism directly equates the embryo's potential existence with its monetary value, forcing the audience to confront how life is priced and traded in the fertility market. The Critical Art Ensemble's participatory theater aims to involve the public in the processes of biotechnology in order to contribute to the development of an informed and critical public discourse on contemporary bioscience. And this provides people with knowledge of how science can be interesting and that it can be misused if in the wrong hands. And that is about it for this. And here are my sources. Thank you.